Dayne Brajkovich has evolved into one of the most instantly recognizable figures in the Australian underworld. A man whose visage is etched into the public consciousness as deeply as the ink that covers his skin. From head to toe, his body is a roadmap of rebellion, but he first rose to prominence as the Hells Angels' most feared enforcer, before morphing into a household name splashed across tabloid newspapers and nightly news bulletins. For some observers, he embodies the quintessential outlaw mystique: violent, loyal to a fault, and utterly unrepentant. For others, he is viewed through a cynical lens as merely a self-obsessed thug, addicted to the dopamine rush of attention. But to understand the man who became the public face of Western Australia's aggressive anti-Bikie crackdown, we must look past the headlines. We need to explore the story of a man who rose from the working-class bitumen of Belmont to the upper echelons of Comedai, the Hells Angels, surviving the kind of visceral violence that usually ends careers or lives in the criminal underworld. Dayne Brajkovich was born on November 11, 1979, and came of age in Belmont, an area in Perth's inner east synonymous with working-class grit and tough streets. He did not just live there. He absorbed the suburb's identity. Proud of his roots, Dayne considered being from Belmont a badge of honor, eventually going so far as to permanently tattoo the suburb's postcode, 6104, onto his ear. It was a visible declaration of loyalty to the concrete and the culture that shaped him. Raised primarily by a single mother, he developed a fiercely protective bond with her and his younger sister Hayley. In stark contrast, his relationship with his father was fraught with tension and complications. The divide was so deep that when his father passed away in 2023, Dayne admitted publicly that he felt no grief, revealing a fracture in the relationship that had likely hardened his kittit, emotional exterior, long before he ever threw a punch in anger. From an early age, Dayne exhibited a rebellious nature that refused to be penned in by authority. He attended Ursula Frayne Catholic College until 1996, but the rigid structures of the school system could not contain him. He was expelled, reportedly for his aggression and a fundamental inability to fit into the system. He moved on to Belmont High to finish his schooling, but by then, he had already developed a taste for trouble. It was in these corridors that he crossed paths with Tristan "Bam Bam" Allbury, a young man who would go on to become a member of the rival Finks Bikie gang. The two quickly became arch-enemies in high school, their clashes serving as a violent prelude to their adult lives. One notable incident saw Tristan land a powerful uppercut that bent Dayne's nose at a party in Carlisle. Tristan would spend much of his adult life in prison, reflecting the intensity of the paths both young men had set for themselves. Both were drawn to fighting, to rebellion, and to the raw codes of loyalty and respect that marked their environment. For Dayne Day, these schoolyard brawls were the early seeds of a worldview that would later fit neatly within the outlaw motorcycle culture. Loyalty above all else, respect earned through violence, and an identity cemented by the ability to stand tall in conflict. After leaving the confines of the schoolyard, Dayne Brajkovich found a new arena that suited his imposing physicality: the doors of Perth's nightclubs. Working as a bouncer, he discovered a professional outlet for his aggression, realizing quickly that he enjoyed the confrontation as much as he thrived on the intimidation it required. Standing guard at the velvet rope, his physical presence was already commanding, a silent warning to anyone thinking of crossing the line. But the chaotic scuffles of nightclub security were not enough to satisfy his drive, and he soon fell in love with the disciplined brutality of the fight game. He began training in Muay Thai, a combat sport known as the art of 8 limbs, which perfectly suited his taste for controlled violence. His fighting career reached a fever pitch in 2001, when he stepped into the ring against Nick Special K. Kara at the Vodafone Arena in Melbourne. It was a major event, staged in front of 10,000 roaring spectators, the lights and the noise amplifying the adrenaline. For Dayne, this was a pivotal moment that confirmed his appetite for the spotlight as much as for the fight itself. His professional record was brief but telling: 9 contests, 5 wins and 4 losses. However, the statistics did not tell the full story. He openly admitted that his real strengths lay in street fights, where the rules were looser, the stakes were higher, and raw intimidation counted for more than refined technique. At one point, he was even scheduled to compete for the Western Australian heavyweight title, a shot at legitimate sporting glory, but that chance evaporated when he found himself on the wrong side of the law. At just 22 years old, Dayne was sent to prison, effectively derailing his sporting aspirations but setting him on a darker path. Initially housed at Wooroloo Prison Farm, a minimum security facility, he refused to be docile. After being involved in a fight, he was transferred to the more secure and unforgiving environment of Acacia Prison. He served 2 years inside, a period that served not as rehabilitation but as an education in the criminal code. He began to absorb lessons that would define his future: never show weakness, never talk to authorities, and above all, cultivate fear. His father's advice, "Give them nothing," became his mantra, hardening his resolve against the system. When he finally emerged from prison, he carried scars and psychological armor that made him ripe for recruitment into Perth's outlaw motorcycle scene. The allure of brotherhood, structured violence, and a fearsome reputation matched the identity he had already been painstakingly building. By 2009, Dayne was already a figure of note in Perth's underworld. That year, he survived a harrowing incident where he took a bullet to the leg in a shooting. True to the code he had adopted, he refused to cooperate with investigators. In a move that became legendary within the biking community, he even kept the lead slug lodged in his body, a permanent, physical reminder of his resilience and his silence. It was exactly the kind of defiance that outlaw clubs admired, and it propelled his rapid rise within the Hells Angels. His size, his willingness to engage in violence, and his absolute refusal to bend to authority made him an ideal enforcer for the club. Over the next decade, Dayne Brajkovich cemented his status as one of the Hells Angels' most notorious enforcers in Perth. But his transformation went far beyond his actions. His entire body became a canvas for ink, a visual manifestation of his commitment to the outlaw life. His scalp, ears, eyelids, and face were tattooed with angels' imagery and aggressive slogans. For Dayne, these tattoos were not merely decorative art, they were psychological armor. A permanent statement of loyalty, designed to terrify opponents before a single punch was even thrown. Inside the club, he was volatile and feared. Outside, his name began to circulate as a man capable of violence without hesitation. By 2020, he was not only one of the Angels' most critical figures, but also its most instantly recognizable. In November 2020, Dayne found himself at the center of a public spectacle that would definitively shape his outlaw reputation. At Scarborough's Sandbar, a popular coastal venue, he engaged in a brazen public brawl with Rebels boss Nick Martin. The confrontation was captured on CCTV, and the footage of two Gangland heavyweights trading blows quickly went viral. The video showed Dayne landing multiple precision punches while Martin struggled to defend himself, a clear display of Dayne's combat training overpowering sheer brute force. Although Dayne later pleaded guilty to fighting in public, and was handed a relatively meager fine of $800, the incident served a much larger purpose. It cemented him as the Angels' most fearsome face in the eyes of the public and the underworld alike. However, the violence was only beginning. Just 2 weeks after their public clash, Nick Martin was assassinated at the Perth Motorplex in a meticulously planned sniper attack, the most high-profile gangland hit Australia had seen in years. Police and media immediately linked Dayne to the killing due to their recent altercation, though he consistently and vehemently denied any involvement. The murder prompted an unprecedented police crackdown, with raids on Bikie headquarters, and a push to toughen enforcement of anti-consorting laws. Yet it would not take long before the spotlight brought lethal danger directly to Dayne's own doorstep. In March 2021, the war came home. Dayne's Ascot residence came under a drive-by attack, with bullets narrowly missing his wife Jacinta and her daughter. The attack involved a black Porsche used for the hit, and a white Mercedes as the getaway car, both stolen vehicles. Police later convicted Jacob Peter Gorton for supplying the vehicles, but the aftermath revealed the twisted web of Perth's criminal loyalties. In a surprising turn, Dayne's former high school rival, Tristan Allbury, became indirectly involved. While housed in the prison's special handling unit, Allbury learned that Gorton, who was in protective custody due to fears of Hells Angels retaliation, was involved in the shooting. Allbury assaulted Gorton during their limited recreation time, effectively retaliating on Dayne's behalf. This unexpected move highlighted the unpredictable nature of outlaw loyalties and underscored a harsh truth. In Dayne's world, the line between friend and foe is razor thin, and danger is a constant companion. In 2022, the unthinkable happened. Dayne Brajkovich was expelled from the Hells Angels, the very brotherhood that had defined his adult life, and the club whose name was literally tattooed across his face. Reports suggested that his expulsion followed escalating internal tensions, culminating in an alleged physical attack on the club president. It was a confrontation that sealed his fate, stripping him of his patch and leaving him exiled from the fraternity he had served as a brutal enforcer. For most men, this would mean erasing the past, but Dayne was not like most men. While some expelled bikies are forced to painfully laser off or cover their gang tattoos, Dayne refused. His body remained a walking billboard for the Hells Angels, even if he no longer wore the colors. He insisted he was still proud of his past and had no regrets. But the rupture left him exposed. Without the formidable protection of the club, he was suddenly vulnerable to rivals and isolated in a shark tank of his own making. This isolation did not drive him into hiding. Instead, he became more flamboyant. In March 2023, Dayne made national headlines during the fallout from the Perth mint gold doping scandal. An investigation revealed that he had purchased $27,000 worth of gold using only a driver's license, bypassing enhanced background checks despite his high-risk criminal profile. While the funds were not proven illegitimate, the transaction highlighted his pivot to a new kind of visibility. This was on full display when he appeared before the Western Australian Residential Tenancy Court. He entered the courtroom not as a defendant in the shadows but as a spectacle, clad in a red tracksuit, accompanied by his wife in an electric blue pantsuit, and dripping in gold. Around his neck hung a signature chain valued at approximately $216,000, and on his fingers, heavy gold rings spelled out Cena and hate. When asked about the latter, he simply told the West Australian, "Hate is hate." This ensemble, appraised at several $100,000, became his personal trademark, a golden armor replacing the leather vest he lost. However, the consequences of leaving the Angels eventually caught up with him. On the evening of December 8, 2023, Dayne was stabbed in the neck outside a Ministry of Sound music event at Kings Park. The attack, occurring around 9:50 p.m., was not a random drunken brawl but appeared to be a coordinated hit. Rushed to Royal Perth Hospital with a serious laceration, he required emergency surgery. Yet, in true Brajkovich fashion, he discharged himself the next day, walking out under police escort. Despite the lethal intent of the attack, Dayne remained silent. He refused to identify his assailants to the police, adhering to the code of silence that had defined him since his youth. As of 2025, no arrests have been made, a testament to how the Bikie culture of silence continues to obstruct justice. Today, Dayne Brajkovich remains a paradox. He is a brutal fighter who frames newspaper clippings like trophies, a feared enforcer who embraces self-obsession, and a man expelled from a brotherhood he still wears on his skin. His story underscores the tension between the law's intent to crush gang influence and the public's enduring fascination with the outlaw archetype. He is both feared and mocked, hated, and fascinated over. As long as his story plays out in headlines, his place in Australia's outlaw history is secure.